be bringing this thing back to life here in person. Hello, how are you doing? Is that okay? Is it a little weird? Have a room with other people? Have any of you found yourselves over the past few years perhaps trapped on a voyage that you did not plan, in a ship that you did not intend for that purpose, for many long months? Or maybe you got sent out multiple times, and now you're just trying to get it out. So, today I want to talk about space, and I mean outer space, but I also mean all of those spaces we've had to navigate in the past couple of years. The inner spaces, the spaces between us, and most importantly, the space of our imaginations. So, this is also kind of an anniversary for me. We're coming up on 10 years of the Center for Scientific Imagination. I put this sort of silly graphic up as the title slide because this was the poster slide for our launch event, which was in 2012. And you can see how important Space Futures was from the very beginning. And then this spaceship to be just like all those definitions of space I was talking about. It was about exploring the future, it was about exploring other planets and solar systems, and it was about exploring ourselves, learning more about who we are. It was about exploring our own. So, the Center for Scientific Imagination has this mission that's all about changing our collective relationship with the future. How can we inspire collective imagination for better futures? If you think about the way most of us imagine the future, first of all, we don't really do it at all. I mean, how many of you have a real sense of what your life or the world is going to be like 10 or 20 years from now? We don't have a lot of practice at that. We don't train for that. Maybe you look at, I don't know, your 401k or your roadmap or some project you're working on, but we don't have a sense of what the world's going to look like, what it's going to feel like. And if you do think about it, maybe you're scared, right? Maybe you're worried about what the future's going to be like. Or maybe you're apathetic and you feel like it's not my problem. You know, somebody in lab code, or some guy in Silicon Valley, or someone in a government building somewhere is going to figure this out. I don't have any power. I can't make any choices about the future. And our mission is to build a much more constructive relationship with the future. Because we all have agency and we all have responsibility. And if your choice is to say, well, I don't have any choices, or if your choice is to say, someone else can decide, you're still making that choice. And one of the biggest problems I think we face as a species, maybe the biggest fundamental problem, is that far too few people feel empowered to imagine their own futures. So that's our central work. How do we do that? We play with it. Yeah. What we do is, if you want to change the future, you need to start by changing the stories that you tell about the future. If you think about the technologies that we live with and play with and work with today, many of them started out in a science fiction story. They started out as a crazy idea, and maybe it was something that was somewhere in between science fiction and nonfiction. Arthur C. Clarke was a science fiction writer, but he invented the idea of the geosynchronous satellite in a technical paper. There's a lot of crossover. There's actually a feedback loop. And so, if we want to change the way we build the future, we need to change the stories we tell. And we need to practice telling new kinds of stories. These stories give us new words, new ideas, new social relationships. And some of the biggest technologies we want to change are not even hardware or software, they're social technologies, like how do we govern ourselves, how do we treat other people, what does equity look like in the future, what does justice mean? So, practicing that is not about polishing up a crystal ball and developing one right answer, creating perfect foresight. It's about practicing this imaginative capacity. It's about thinking about the horizon with which we see the world, expanding that horizon. Humans are the dominant species on this planet, not because we can run fast, or because we can start applause, or because we can jump really high. We have achieved this position on this planet because we have the broadest horizon of imagination. The broadest temporal horizon. We can plan farther ahead. We can think farther back than any other species. So, we're going to do a little 5-act drama tonight. I want to talk to you about 3 projects that we've done at the center. And everything we do is in collaboration with other people. So everything I talk about tonight involves lots of other people and really channeling their energy in lots of different ways. We talk about 3 different projects, and then I'm going to talk about what that has to do with all those different versions of space and imagination. So the first one I want to talk about is exactly this process I was just describing to you. How do we start to imagine different futures, and how do we use stories to do that? So I call this stretching the canvas. This is a project we did in around it came out in 2017, so we were working in 2017, and it was a research project funded by NASA. And NASA was interested in what's going to happen next in space when NASA's not the only outfit, and it's not just big government space agencies that are going out to space. What happens when we have commercial activity in space? What is that going to mean in terms of policy? And for us, this became a question of, well, we know how to go to space. We've known how to go to space for 50, 60 years. The technical problems are real, but they've been solved, and we'll keep coming up with better and cheaper and smarter solutions. So it's no longer a question of how do we get there. The question now is, why should we go? Who gets to go? And who's going to pay for it, right? So this project was an effort to bring together a bunch of different expertise that is not part of the normal NASA playbook. So we had some NASA folks, we had some space scientists and researchers, but we also had some science fiction writers. We had artists like the tremendous artists who did all the concept art for this project. We had historians, we had economists, we had psychologists, because part of our thinking with this project was the future of this commercial space future feels like it's completely new and nothing like it has ever been done before. But that's actually not true. This is just the latest in a whole series of eras of exploration where humans have gone into the unknown and gone through this transition phase from the early phases when only the truly crazy people were getting, you can get on that boat, get into that outrigger canoe, and voyage off. Nobody ever been before. Into something that people did more regularly. And you saw this unknown space get slowly woven into the fabric of human activity. And so when you think about the future of space exploration, we have a lot of lessons we can learn from history around the ways in which different parts of the Earth have been explored, and are we talking about natural resources and extracting and using those resources? Are we talking about maybe learning from all the terrible things that happened when we did that in the past? Are we talking about inclusion and who's going to get to go and how we're going to create new spaces that bring the best of humanity with us, and not just shall we say, the most religious aspects of it. And so, working with that, so we did this, we identified 4 key areas that we wanted to work on. Exoplanets, lower orbit activity, asteroid mining, and what was my 4th one? Thank you. There it is, Mars. Right? These are all policy areas, space policy areas that NASA is really interested in. And for them, this was a research project that they funded because they saw this gap between all of the technical work. You know, NASA planners and engineers and researchers have been working on all of these topics for decades. They have decades of technical work with this. But the social side, what happens when NASA's, the domain of knowledge and the domain, the people who are working on this stuff are in this network of actors is not just NASA anymore, when all sorts of commercial groups, nonprofit groups, and others are going up to space, and space gets woven into this fabric of human activity. This was a new territory for them. And the benefit they saw in these narratives, scenarios, as they call them, is that a good science fiction story invites everybody into this conversation. So you might be an engineer and you say, well, I don't know about economics. Or you might be an economist who says, well, I don't know anything about robots or asteroid mining. Or you might be a member of the public, or you might be a business person, or you might be a legislator or a policymaker. And a good story about the future invites everybody into that vision. You might not agree with it. You might say, it invites everybody into a kind of imagined room, right? And you might say, well, this couch is in the wrong place. We got to move the chair, or these curtains are in the wrong color. But you can all invite all of those people in to have that discussion on an equal playing field and have a much more inclusive conversation about the futures that we want. What would be a good future? And as Neil Stephenson, one of our collaborators in our work and from the very earliest days of CSI, likes to say, a good science fiction story can save you hundreds of hours of meetings and PowerPoints because it gets everybody on the same page. So what we did in this project is engaged in a big, collaborative, multi-month conversation. So each of these themes had a group of people who are interested in that theme, and they can talk about different ideas. And a big part of our work is how do we invite people to shed some of their armor and say something crazy that they wouldn't necessarily publish in a peer-reviewed journal. Take a little bit of a speculative risk and say, well, this is something that could happen. I've been sort of thinking about this is something that's interesting to me. And share that with other people and invite everybody to take some of those creative risks. Invite writers to say, well, look, we don't want you to just run off to your writing area, go to your shed, and just type up a story and send it to us. We want you to let us into your creative process, collaborate with these people who aren't writers. Take a risk in that way, and to ask the engineers and scientists to talk about, to speculate about things instead of just sticking to, well, this is what we know for sure, this is true for 20 years. Say, well, what do you think might be possible 20 or 30 years from now? And to ask policymakers to do that too, to say, well, let's speculate together. This is a question that policymakers don't often get a chance to answer. In a perfect world, what do you think? How do you think this should work? Right? How should we design the system? And so these conversations led to a set of stories, nonfiction essays, and just a really interesting set of ideas. And this book, along with most of the stuff we do, is really available on our website. So you can download this, or you can order yourself a on-demand copy. You get the paper printing, but you don't have to just pay for paper. I have no idea what the paper costs these days, so watch out. But these stories explore all sorts of interesting things. So Carter Schultz wrote one called Vanguard 2.0, which is about sort of Uber-like CEO who decides that he wants to collect an early Vanguard satellite, one of the first satellites the U.S. launched, to make it into basically a table decoration for himself in his house. So it's a reflection on what happens when non-governmental actors start to have real power in space, and who gets to decide. And in the story, there's some other characters who decide maybe the CEO's plan is not the best plan, and they act against it. And another one that I found really fascinating about Nashi, which, first of all, there's so many really fascinating things in the story. It imagines an all-female crew going on a mission to Mars, posing a very logical argument, which has been discussed in NASA and elsewhere, that female astronauts weigh less, they eat less, they would be more efficient in many ways, especially for a long-term mission. So why are we sending dudes in space? Very good question. But the real thrust of the story is not about that. It's about one of these astronauts who, I'm going to spoil the story, so sorry, but it's timed in the title, so I'm not going to spoil it already. Who decides to go on this mission even though she knows that she has a terminal illness. And she chooses, this is how she wants to go out, right? She wants to die on Mars. And she tells the doctor on the mission, and they keep it a secret for a long time until the other crew members figure it out, and then they are unsurprisingly upset about this. And everybody has to have this reflection of, well, how do you balance that mission safety, the responsibilities you have to other people, the responsibilities to yourself, the idea of privacy, and some really interesting issues, and a kind of beautiful analogy to what it means to engage in this rate, to take this rate, right, to engage in a scientific mission like that. So a really wonderful story as well. And then Ramazan, a story about asteroid mining, and again, so his question is not why are we sending any dudes into space. His question is why are we sending humans at all? Robots do all of this. And if you lose a robot, who cares? It's fine. Nothing compared to the cost of a human life. And so in his story, this is a human who's sort of fighting for his chance to go on this mission and working with these robots and saving his life. And again, it's this reflection on not just the future of space or asteroid mining, but the future of automation, the future of labor, the future of humans in space. And then the next three stories I'll tell you a little bit about. This is a Disney observation platform. Steve Barnes writes a story about inclusion and who gets to go to space and the entirely likely possibilities, especially if folks like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Richard Branson are commercializing space. Space is going to be a place where rich people get to go. Right? So how do we feel about that? And how do we feel about the age-old question, why are we spending all this money for rich people to go to space, maybe rich countries to go to space, and we have plenty of problems here on Earth? And those questions are not going to go away. We have Kim Stanley Robinson, the Lowell Science Institute writer, is part of this book as well, and he makes a really compelling argument that for the next century, space is a kind of luxury good. Space exploration, space travel is not, we're not going to find, Earth 2 out there in any realistic time frame. That's not going to be, we're not going to be able to just bug out all the problems we created for ourselves as measures and find somewhere else to go. Space exploration is pretty exciting, and he's spent decades writing about it. Literally, it's a fan, but he's saying we also have to pay attention to, like, during the hunger. And then finally, Carl Schroeder connects Mars exploration to VR and automation. So what if you could homestead on Mars by sending your robots there, and then you stay here on Earth, you live on Mars time, and you're telling your robots that you set your homestead on the promise that one day you're going to be able to get there. It sounds a little bit like, questionable time shares in Florida as well. Other reasons. And last, maybe my favorite reflection, the third problem. But Donna Singer writes a story about exoplanets and exploring this question: what if we find alien life and it's so alien that we can't even recognize it? We don't even know that it's alive, right? We're so limited in our experience. We're so limited in our perspective on what life means. And this story was really influenced by conversations with the astrobiologist Holly Morris, who said, look, maybe you should think about life as a kind of continuum. It's not 1 or 0, it's not alive or not alive. There are all sorts of intermediate stages when you think about complex systems, when you think about computers and AI, you think about the rock tumbling down the hill. And so when we find life out there in the universe, it might surprise us and look like something completely different. So I want to wrap up our first act here by talking about some of the things we learned, not just through this project, but a number of other things like this that we've done, which is about creating the conditions for inspiring people and inviting people to imagine these futures together. One of the other key precepts of the work we do is not just about you in your own head having your own imagination, even though we all have this mental holodeck that's working all the time and imagining different possibilities. What gets really interesting is when you imagine things together, right? When you convince somebody else to share your vision. And that's the space between us is in some ways an virtual bubble. I mean, how do you know that when you're talking about the color blue and the person next to you sees the same thing? That blue means the same thing as the right? How do we, that's just blue. How do we talk about love, justice, democracy? And actually, I think we have a lot of trouble coming to terms, agreeing on what words mean. And so, imaginative capacity and collaborative imagination we do together. When you figure that out, you change the world. Everything that we do together is an act of imagination. I mean, you spend all this time carrying little pieces of paper and plastic around and waving them at things and pretending that somehow this, this counts, right? We've invested all of this energy and money worrying about money, wondering whether we're thinking about how we get more money. And it's just these little pieces of paper, right? And so many of the things we've constructed, these imaginative systems, they end up governing us, right? We become caught up and we become trapped in our own machines. And so just the act of imagining something else, just the act of watching a Star Trek episode when we were talking about this earlier, and seeing this future where there is no money is radical, right? And it's not that I'm saying you need for the money, but just engaging in that exercise and developing the capacity to imagine an alternative possible world is really, really important. And it's something that I think we should be teaching people in school. It's kind of remarkable to me. You know, we have little kids are so imaginative, and we sort of pound it out of everybody for formal education. And then when they're grown, we turn around and say, well, what happened? Why aren't you more like Steve Jobs or Margaret Atwood? Why aren't you more imaginative? We don't have any very effective ways of even making imagination visible, much less teaching it. So this is from a paper that we published, was also really available if you're really excited. You can find that. Just kind of very simplistically say, well, this is, you gotta set the room. You have to take the space. You have to invite people in the right way. You have to define the processes. A big part of what we do is we take perfect off the table. So when we bring people together, especially we like to do it in person, so we can go ahead and do it. And say, okay, so you're going to imagine this world, you've got these amazing people at your table, you've got 45 minutes. Okay, get on it. And then you can imagine the characters. You're going to make a timeline. You're going to start to spec this thing out, and then you're going to tell the story in the future. And then, most importantly, always thinking about what are we trying to do, what kind of impact are we trying to have on the world. And so, with this NASA project, this was about engaging with people at NASA and people in the space policy role, but also engaging in broader publics. And the thing I love most about this project, that our technical report, our research report to NASA, is also our collection, our anthology of science fiction and non-fiction. It's the book, right? The book is the work, is the research. That makes me really happy. So, Act 2. Okay, we talked about imagining being out there in the world, imagining different space futures, imagining what happens when the web of human activity and connection starts to spread out into the lower world. It extends to the moon, it extends to Mars. And NASA is still out there on the river, right? Imagining NASA is going to Europa, NASA is going to the asteroid belt. There was a voyage or a spacecraft or leaving the solar system. But then there's this thickening web of human activity around us, and humans are starting to just live life, starting to dwell in space. So, Act 2 is about what happens if you actually make art in space. This is a project where we were really just the supporters, the cheerleaders. There's this amazing guy, a photographer, artist, writer, public speaker named Juan Jose Diaz in New Mexico, who's the son of a famous Mexican architect, government in plastics, not construction. But Juan Jose Diaz decided in 2011 that he wanted to launch a satellite into space as an art project. And he got a group of other Mexican artists together. They started to imagine what this would look like. And at the time, it was a moderately crazy idea, but it's really not that crazy idea. Elementary school kids have built satellites and launched into space. Have any of you built satellites? You should. Bringing back to that. So they engaged in this project, and this project was not just to be crazy. This project was a reaction to what they saw as a set of incredible challenges. They were looking at their country trapped in years of brutal violence, cartel warfare, political unrest, corruption, and feeling like the world as it is not working. It doesn't have a future. There's no story that makes sense for them there. And so this crazy idea of building an art project, satellite, and launching it into space was, I don't know if you can see the this, but it was this idea that this act is an act of optimism, it's an act of total transformation, something that's never been done before, and it would demonstrate that different futures are possible, that something crazy, that radical change is possible, that transformation is possible. And the story of how they pursued this goal is wonderful, and this is also up in Spanish and English on our website if you want to read what became the diary of Ulysses 1, the satellite. Because they went through all of these crazy adventures in advancing this plan. So first of all, their collective predated the existence of the Mexican space agency, and so it was met by great consternation by the Mexican government. It was like, what are you doing? Why are you trying to launch the space mission? And they engaged in all of these crazy things. One came to the U.S., he went to MIT and other places, he was talking about this project in the media, and other people were saying, like, oh yeah, at MIT, they writing the book, this is just a group of people who are like, oh yeah, sure, so you want to launch a satellite? Oh yeah, we do that, cool. And then he was buying space parts, he was buying parts, and their satellite, by the way, was a top hand. Okay, so that's what you do. A CubeSat is basically a coffee can size thing. I'm pretty sure they use an actual coffee can, but they needed real equipment to put on it because they wanted it to do stuff, and they had artistic work that the satellite was doing in space. So he was ordering stuff on his credit card, and then his credit card got suspended, and he was, on a fraud list because he seemed to be trying to export sensitive space technologies to Mexico. And apparently he had to write a letter to the Pentagon promising that he was not going to sell any of his poetry technology to companies to countries on certain lists, lists of countries living in life. So all of these amazing things happened in the process of designing Ulysses 1. And Ulysses 1 was really this artistic statement. But it's not just a sketch, it's not just a Leonardo da Vinci-esque sketch on a piece of paper, it's a real thing that they built. And the real story, the artistic process is about, as artists trying to figure out this crazy idea and assemble it, put it together, make this thing, and actually get it into space. And it took years, and it was this fascinating story, and it's the journey that is the purpose, right? The journey is what's meaningful in this story. So just one of these many episodes, JJ was one, met this French engineer who was an expert satellite builder who has this little satellite building operation in Paris in France. That's a model of the Sputnik that he's holding there. And this guy helped him create the designs for the satellite. They actually built this is the photo of the actual satellite that they built, and it has poetry on it, right? And it was broadcasting a beat, just like Sputnik. They were inspired by the original 1957 Sputnik. And it was this idea that this thing was going to go up there, and it was going to send this signal of possibility. One of my favorite many episodes, I don't even understand how this happened, but somehow they got connected with this school for samurai in Mexico. And for a while, the samurai were going to maybe support them and help give them this money to launch this thing into space. But then they decided that this was weird, it's not something for them to do, but they still got this amazing picture of them holding this satellite. And there's so much more, that I'm not covering here. But they did it, sort of. There are all sorts of problems with getting on the launch manifest and coming up with the money, and then launches getting delayed, and working with these different commercial launch companies to try to get their satellite launched. But in the end, they did launch Ulysses 1 from a book fair in Lowell. The first satellite ever launched from a book fair on a stratospheric orbit. So it made it, I think we can. They made it into space, and it operated for something like 90 minutes, and they recorded the data from the satellite, and the satellite had all of these different artists contributing. So there was poetry, there was music, somebody composed an original, score for music that was connected to the satellite, there was digital art, and this whole story, and they did a number of different art installations and projects throughout the process, and they're continuing to be, Especially making continues to operate, and is now engaged in different kinds of activism, and I just checked with one earlier this week. Also, some new things are happening, so you can follow up with them, get involved if you want to. But I wanted to show two slides and sort of what we learned from our second half. The first is this set of triangles. So, it's science, art, technology. And within that triangle is all this other stuff that is interesting and complex and confusing, like economics, politics, magic, religion, philosophy, consumerism. I think that's what consumer means. Everyone speaks Spanish. You can tell me if I'm wrong. And this triangle, the series of triangles, I love because it's also an homage to this psychologist, Lev Vygotsky, early Soviet psychologist, who talked about the way we process the world, the way we interact with the world, the way we live with the world. And then there's the subject, there's the object, like this microphone. But somehow, between me and this microphone, there's a third thing, which is culture, which is imagination, which is knowing this is microphone, and not a stick or like an earth ball to throw at something, right? And actually, you can never see the world without going to that third place. You can never see the world without relying on your imagination, because we only can see the things that we learned how to see. It's really hard to see the things that we haven't learned how to see. That's why science is so hard. Science is this exercise, is this vast architecture designed to help us see things that haven't been seen before, to make visible the parts of the aspects of the world that might be scary us in the face, but we just never even know how to look at them, never look at how to see them, never have the right word. That idea of, we can see the same color blue, different languages, different cultures have different words for colors. And if you don't have the word for blue, it can be really hard to see blue. You might say, well, that's just a different shade of green, right? So language plays a really important role in this, but also other kinds of rituals and beliefs and the aesthetics, the visual worlds that we grow up in. I think about all the time we spend in our education sort of imprinting that third place in all of our teaching people how to read and write, teaching people right and wrong, teaching people how to memorize, our guidelines, our rules, so much of school is rules. And programming us collectively for a certain kind of shared cultural imagination. And so what I love about that triangle is this idea that you can only perceive the world through imagination and something more. You are making the world through your imagination. So if you don't have that third place to go to, the world isn't really there. We all have our own version of reality running in our heads. Perhaps you discovered this at an author Thanksgiving. So we all experience the world through this mental holodeck. That even the evidence of our senses, your eyes, your brain throws out like 95% of that. Like most of the data we have, it's too much data. We get rid of it, we edit the snippets that are left into a story that we find convincing about the world, right? And if you think about a magic trick or a political rally, so much of the story that's being assembled there, the magic tricks that are being played they're about using our imagination. They're relying on the stories that we want to hear or the stories that maybe we should want to hear. And so ultimately, what Ulysses, this beautiful, magnificent art project is about is this word, poiesis. It's about making things in the world. And so poiesis is the root of the word poetry, but it's also about making stuff. It's about making reality. And what these artists are doing, what their crazy, magnificent project is all about, is making a different reality by doing this thing that we become before. And every act of imagination is ultimately comes down to this, right? And how do we practice that? How do we cultivate it to support that? Is I think, one of the great challenges of the next century, how we find new ways to imagine futures together and act on those imaginations. Okay. Are you still with me? I agree. Yeah. I see more people here than me, so I'm going to take that as a plus. Great. So, I talked about imagining space futures. I talked about actually doing art in space. And now I want to talk about what happens when you bring space here to Earth. So a few years ago, we every year, except not the past couple of years for weird couple of reasons, we do this art science festival called Merge. And in 2018, we decided to build a space, city in space. So we created Luna City. And Luna City was asking some of the same questions you'll remember from Act 1. What is it going to feel like to live in space? What does it feel like when going to space is no longer a dangerous, expensive thing that specialists are ordered by governments to do? What happens when they're just teenagers in space? And what happens when the people who are living in space are bored? They feel like this place is something that's boring. I want to go somewhere that's even more interesting, right? So these are some of the starting points for Luna City. And again, with that question of who gets to go to space, how do we think about access? How is this space future going to play out? So over the course of about 9 months in 2018, 2017, and 2018, we assembled around 200 people all told eventually were involved in this project in imagining and creating this space future. Starting with the same kind of collaborative imagination sessions that I talked about before. Here we had artists and designers. We had people who were interested in the microbiome and gut bacteria, saying, you have to figure that out in space because it's so important to the way our bodies function. So we started imagining what people eat dirt from Earth once a year, the ritual to reconnect with our natural habitat, our microbiome. We have musicians and performers, theater folks, designers, space scientists, and engineers, all sorts of researchers involved in this. I'm going to play a video to give you a little sense of what we came up with, and then I'll talk you through how we got there.
I came to Arizona State last fall to help a team here that was developing an interesting project to model and fabricate a moon base. What would it be like, and why would you do it, and what would the ramifications be? In the Luna City that I visited, there were several things that I loved. And then, but far more, the sociality was quite beautiful.
So I came to Luna City, and it is so different. You know, we do not have things such as government or focus on wealth. We don't have currency and such. And it's very open, and it's very supportive.
Just how many people and groups were involved in that, how, if you want to take that question seriously, what's it going to feel like to go into space, it's, you have to bring the whole world with you, right? You have to bring all of these different experts and dancers and kids and plants, all of these different things with you to create something that feels as complex and compelling as life on Earth. And creating that as a visceral experience where you can walk into this neighborhood of Luna City and interact with performers and get involved in different stories like a wedding or a funeral that are playing out around you, makes all of those questions much more real. And it's, again, not about making a crystal ball. It's about opening the door. and inviting you to start imagining your own futures and ask, well, is this the world that I want to live in? So this is just a view of how you get into Luna City, and it's a view of how we get into the process. So here are some of the people brainstorming in these early days when we started to imagine this future. We created this whole timeline of this future, and it's important that Luna City, when we visited, is not a shiny new space city. It's a place that's old and has its own history. We were inspired by Arizona mining towns, where they might have had several different lives and had to reinvent themselves. I think about places that started out as a boom town, and then the economy changes, or the mine runs out, who sticks around, how does that place survive, and then does it become an artist colony, does it become a tourist destination, and again, how do we get to a future where the kids in the city say, man, I've got to get out of here, I want to go to Europa, I want to go somewhere else. And so that's why it was also important to set this in 2175, far enough into the future that we can have all of these different players. And this is probably much too small for me, but it has artistic events and political events and economic events, all of these different things that move together into a future history. This is a prototype that the group decided that the Luna City would have a hyperloop, and that would be part of the important part of how you get around. And so you start to create these layers of structure. And so in physical prototyping, how do you get to physically build all this stuff? So once you start to make things and say, like, well, what room is this going in, right? Where are we putting all these things? You're making really important decisions about how your stories play out, how your things work together. And as you can see from these images, there's so much wood, natural material here, which again felt like a real departure from how we tend to imagine space futures. On this theory that actually, first of all, the moon might go over really well, that lower gravity on the moon, and you're going to need these renewable resources to survive. If you're trying to bring everything up from Earth, you're not going to be able to last. And what does it look like to have a resilient, long-running, maybe not entirely self-sustaining, but largely self-sustaining community? And then, most importantly for us, it's not just about making a bunch of prototypes and going to some sort of, museum of the moon. It's about creating an experience that you can really interact with, to feel like you're visiting the neighborhood rather than just space. And so all of these performers, this river running through the environment, were incredibly powerful in inviting people into that. And also the ephemera, the stuff around the edges, posters for sporting events and concerts that were just were nothing more than a poster, but that poster gives you a glimpse into this whole other piece of this world. So all of this world building was really powerful in Luna City. And then, this was one of the things that really surprised me and I loved, was that there were these kids running around. Some of these performers brought their kids along to also be residents of Luna City. And you got that sense of intergenerational living. And everybody had a story, right? So the kids were also, they had their story of who they were in this world, and you could talk to them, and characters had different connections and interactions, and you could follow up on threads and little subplots of this neighborhood and people hanging out there. And just to watch people get drawn into that as they walk through this space was really incredible. And then building on the future, so much of the future is going to be stuff that we bring with us that we'll recognize from today. Dance and music, these things will always be there in the future. And people are going to be, I hope so. It's going to be a really great future where they'll have some delicious food, right? So imagining the things that we carry with us and what those would look like in the future is really powerful as well. And then thinking about this is something that we do, again, together. We imagine together. One of my favorite things about this experience was how people started to write themselves into Luna City. They'd say, I'm just up from Earth for the weekend. I'm visiting my cousin or my niece. And I love that so much. And we did a live podcast of this podcast Imaginary World, which is a wonderful podcast. If you're following what I'm selling here, you might like that too. But they did a live recording of that in the auditorium, and that's where people would get involved. This was a political debate between people in Luna City about whether the people should be allowed to break off and create their own communities outside of Luna City, or whether that would be too detrimental to the central survival of this main colony, so you can't do that. And then this idea that people would make things as a way of making futures. that world building is a toolkit you can use. You don't have to go into the Fab Lab or the theater. You don't have to create a performance, but you can create a future by imagining this world. And through the act of thinking of it as a world, you build all of these different connections, and you make something that's much richer and more powerful and thought-provoking than just following one single thread and trying to project one line forward. Okay. And here's the Spaceship Earth. So those were our 3 projects. I want to talk about Stuart Brand. Anyone recognize the name Stuart Brand? Stuart Brand, I think, is still kicking. He was one of the great figures in the counterculture in the 1960s. Hung out with Ken Kesey, hung out on the bus, did lots of mind-altering things. While he was doing one of those mind-altering things, on a rooftop in San Francisco, this question popped into his head. Why haven't we seen a picture of the whole Earth yet? And he started this little campaign. He would hand out buttons. He was an activist saying, we need to see a picture of the whole Earth. Not too long after that, NASA obliged. And this was a really powerful picture. He was right. We needed to see a picture of the whole Earth. This picture encapsulated something that another character from the 60s, Buckminster Fuller, liked to say, which is that we live on Spaceship Earth. That's what I'm Spaceship Earth. We have no operating name for Spaceship Earth, but this is it. This is our planet. This is where we live, and it's we stand around some same before. We can go to the moon, we can go to Mars, maybe we can get to exoplanets. But this is our home, right? This is our home base, and we need to take care of Spaceship Earth. And so another major area of futures work for us is around climate. And I love, this is a picture, this is a cover of one of our anthologies of climate futures. We have these writing contests. So people from 50 or 60 different countries around the world, 600 or 700 entries, I forget exactly, relevant climate futures stories in this contest. And I love this image. I want to show it to you because it builds right off of that idea of Spaceship Earth. And we don't call it a climate futures contest, we call it everything changed. We don't launch our Apple. We came to this essay a few years ago, and she said, that's what it is. It's not climate change, it's everything changed. And look at this Earth. This is an Earth with lots of things happening on the planet, but also lots of things around the planet, right? That our station has all these satellites now. It has the web of our imagination really is expanding into orbit. This is a graph of how many satellites we have. Companies like SpaceX, different countries are registering tens of thousands of spots for future satellites. We're in this rapidly accelerating trajectory towards space futures, but not just as going to the moon or going to Mars, as ways to thicken our web of human activity around Earth. Because satellites, just like that picture of our whole planet, are a way for us to see our world in a new way, to start imagining our world in a new way. So climate futures for us is very much related to space futures. Anytime we talk about space futures, you also have to ask what's happening on the planet Earth. These are just some of our other climate futures projects. I encourage you to check them out online if you'd like to. Some of the part of those projects. A lot of work on solar futures and what it would look like. Let's say we have a huge solar energy transition in Arizona. What's that going to feel like? What new problems are we going to have? Because that's not like all of a sudden it's all rainbows and unicorns. We're going to have other issues too. And what are the challenges we have? And so climate imagination is another one of these spaces. The space of our planet, the space of our social engagement with climate. So we have another project, Climate Imagination Futures. These are these 4 fellows who are working on that. If you feel so inclined, you can go on this website and send yourself or someone else a postcard, climate future postcard. So send a postcard for the future. And use one of these images. There's some other ones up there as well. And you get to decide where this is, and when this is, and what you're doing. And it's just a little invitation, right? Just a little opportunity to step into a different future, imagining the possibilities. Okay. So, how do we take action on this. How do we do this stuff? I present to you that imagination is the launch system for these features. Imagination is the precursor of all this other stuff we know is really important, like innovation, like anticipation, like resilience, like empathy, imagining what it's like to be somebody else. Imagination is this incredible cognitive capacity that we all have, but that we hardly ever think about. It's like electricity, you know, you just flip on the light, you expect it to be there, you don't really think about it until it's not, right? We've all heard about failures of imagination, crises of imagination. And if you look at climate, if you look at a global pandemic, all of these different challenges we're facing, we are, as the writer and activist Adrian Marie Brown likes to say, we're in an imagination battle. We need to start taking this word and this capacity more seriously. So, not so far from here, in Volcanic Crater is a gigantic artist installation that an artist named James Turrell has created. And this, too, is a kind of spaceship. This is an imagination instrument. He's built this gigantic set of apertures, he's fascinated by astronomy, and he's designed and calibrated these spaces so that some of them will be perfectly aligned to only like 8,000 years in the future. And he has this whole chart of different astronomical observations that can be made from these spaces. You can check out the website for this project. It's amazing. I was fortunate enough to take class of students up there in the ancient, the war times when we used them. And just wanted to say, you know, this is Earth in space. That's all of the different versions of space that I've been talking about. You can see in this picture. But it doesn't, you don't need to define your own volcano to make this happen. I have one more video to show you this very short. We've made a lot of rocket ships in our house. How many rocket ships have we made? Anyone made a rocket ship? See a few hands, right? Imagination does not require sophisticated tools and expertise and large teams of devoted fans. Imagination happens every day. It's all around us, everywhere. Everywhere is a launch site for imagination. And I want to encourage you to think about how you make your own imagination and the imagination of those around you more visible, how you support it, how you foster it, and how we celebrate it together, right? And it's the little things. Sometimes it's the smallest things that change the world. It's all of it together, because we are all connected. We're all on this space voyage together. And that's where I want to leave you. Space is not a void. It's a canvas for our own imaginations. The questions about how we get there, who gets to go, who pays for it, those are just at the beginning. It's really about who we are, who we want to become. We explore the universe because we're curious, but it's not about what we're going to find out there, it's what we're going to find here, what that knowledge is going to do to us, who we want to become as a species, and how we can try to mirror the beauty, the stunning beauty of this world beyond us, and the beauty that we create amongst ourselves. Thank you. Some of you are still here. You have questions? Comments? This is a time to lodge formal protests.
Yeah. I have a question. So I feel like anytime I have seen a documentary on, a video on, a talk on space, it always becomes something that's rather philosophical. So there's a lot of science around space exploration and astronomy. Why do you think it is that astronomy and the study of space makes us wax philosophical and think about ourselves?
I think it has to do with that picture of seeing the whole Earth and recognizing not just that the Earth is one unitary system, planetary system, but then the Earth is this tiny spaceship in this vast cosmos, and I think anytime you start to contemplate the universe in that fact, you can't help but engage with that philosophical perspective of the cosmic and recognize how small we really are in concern with vastness of space. And also, I mean, first of all the science required imagination. All of the art around space required imagination. Think about Polynesian voyagers who would navigate across thousands of miles of the Pacific and use their knowledge of celestial navigation. That requires, guts and this shared capacity, telling the stories, developing the star compasses, doing this collective imagination work. So I think it naturally leads us to that. I think that it's just maybe impossible not to have a little bit of that philosophical perspective. Just you're trying to grapple with the magnitudes and the depths and all the meanings that were involved. But that's a great question. I should, for those online, the question was, why is it philosophy always seem to come up when we're talking about space and space? Great question.
Okay. Do you so imagination is universal, I guess, all humans have it. But is there a cultural component to it? Do you think some cultures may be more encouraging of imagination than others?
I think that every culture is a kind of imagination practice. That maybe part of what culture is creating a shared imagination, figuring out how to transmit it across the decades or the centuries. And the things that persist, why people still cut down trees and drag them to their houses every year? It doesn't have anything to do with the story of Jesus Christ. So people have decided that it does. It's a shared imagination practice that has persisted in a fascinating way. And so I think every culture has an imaginative practice. And I think different cultures emphasize or focus on different things, right? So we can all only do the things that we can think of, which sounds very heavily and generic, but there's some profound truth to that, I think. And what's really interesting is learning how to pay attention to the people who can think something you can't, right? You see, traveling the world and encountering other cultures and realizing, there's like a completely different way that people have thought through what it means to eat together, or to be together, or what it means, what we should do when people die. These basic transitions and rituals, and they can just open up whole new spaces. So I don't think that it's productive to think about any one as better than another, but I think that thinking about it almost like a genetic diversity question. How with all of these different adaptations around the world, how do we learn from one another? It's a great question.
We have a question on YouTube.
Great.
What programs does ASU Center for Science and the Imagination have right now or coming up?
Oh, good question. What programs does the Center for Science and Imagination at ASU have right now coming up? Please navigate to our website, get on our mailing list. We do public events. We have a number of virtual events. For example, next week on Wednesday, I'm going to be moderating a panel where we're doing conversations with the Secretary of Transportation on imagination and the future of transportation. It's very exciting. We're also going to have some science fiction writers and have a discussion about that after we have a discussion with the Secretary. So that's coming right up. And if you look at our setting up our mailing list for reviews and other things, we don't do a ton of events, so maybe like 1 a month or something like that. And they also use things in person, and we have a quarterly newsletter you can sign up for on our website as well. So, and tons of stuff, basically everything that we've talked about here and any other projects, free books, teacher resources, all kinds of great material available if you'd like to go check it out.
We have a comment from Jasmine on YouTube saying that reshaping for the better future sounds kind of scary.
So, should I read that out too? So, Jasmine on YouTube says, reshaping for a better future sounds kind of scary. Jasmine, I agree with you. That's true. But I'm more scared what happens if we don't do it. I think that change always involves risk, and a lot of what we're talking about is taking these creative risks, imaginative risks. It's not everything that we imagine, we don't have to take into it. It doesn't have to be something that we work to make real. And it's important to imagine the things that we don't want. It's just that we do a lot of that already. We have a lot of dystopias, we have a lot of fears and things we're worried about. So that's important, but we also need to imagine the things we want. And have the difficult discussion about whether we all want it together, right? Because it's one thing for me to come up with my perfect future, but for us all to work on something like that together, that's pretty hard. We don't have a lot of practice doing that. We spend a lot of time worrying about arguing about things we don't want. And so building that collective capacity to imagine the future, yeah, it's scary, but I think it's really important too.
So you were talking about how you got the science fiction writers together with engineers and so I'm curious about what the attitude was. When you watch certain shows, there always seems to be an attitude like, we're going to bring the best of us. And then there are others that are, oh no, we're definitely going to see the worst of us. And I'd be curious, what was the trend when these people got together? Did they think that we're headed for a better direction, or did they feel like we're going to bring this baggage and maybe some of the worst of us is going to make it out there first?
So I think it depends, and some people gravitate towards certain kinds of stories more than others. In general, we gave up a long time ago on kind of having rules. We set up headlines to writers and artists and scientists, none of them follow rules. So the question was about getting better at this. The question was, what happens when you bring these writers together? Do some people want to imagine only the worst of us going out into these futures, and some of us imagine only the best of us? But I think for the most part, what happens and what feels most plausible to me is it's going to be all of us. You know, you can't, the best of us are also the worst of us. I think we've all had that experience on a personal level, right? And we can take multitudes. So every future, it's going to be more plausible if we recognize that it's going to have that whole spectrum of humanity. And I think it's noble and important for us to pursue Dr. King's vision that the moral arc of the universe may be long and advanced towards justice. And I think it's okay and good for us to imagine better futures and imagine ourselves getting better in these futures. But I think it's all of us. You know, I don't think that, and I think that what happens when we try to imagine utopia, only the best will get to go, is that it turns out that in every utopia, that's a dystopia, and vice versa.
I have a question on YouTube that maybe is similar to that, is are we prepared? Are we ready to do this?
Okay, a question from YouTube is, are we prepared to do this? I think we have the capacity to do this, but we don't have the vocabulary. We don't even know how to talk about it. We don't have the words to get our arms around that whole idea of imaginative capacity. It's something that we've been grappling with. People ask me often, you know, do you have a bibliography? Where's the journal? Where's the set of research that ties it all together? And there's a lot of research that is not tied together. And this is something that we're starting to work on now. It was really productive in the first few years to not define imagination, just do a bunch of stuff that we want to do. But we're now coming around to building that collective network and thinking about imagination as kind of a field that connects all these different scientists and cognitive neuroscientists and psychologists and people who do education and learning science and people who do creative arts and music and performance. All of these people are masters of imagination in different ways, are great practitioners of imagination, and sometimes great scholars and researchers of it, but in these very specific ways. So I think that we all have this this cognitive system built in, and maybe it's a really important part of our evolutionary history. That the imagination really is the thing that got us where we are as a species. That gave us the power of foresight and anticipation and long-term planning, the power of empathy, all of those mirror neurons, the cognition that we use to figure out, well, you know, what's the hierarchy here, what's the debate, you know, how does this whole system fit together? We have a lot of brain power that goes to that stuff. And it's part of what helps us create giant cities that live together. You know, how we for all of our flaws and horrible wars, we are still pretty remarkable in getting along with one another. We get better at it. But this is all imaginative capacity. We just don't see it that way. And so I think that the capacity is there, but I think we do need more tools and practices, and that's something that we're working on. Things like the projects I talked about really are efforts at prototyping new processes for collaborative imagination. So thank you for that question.
Very popular on YouTube. I have another question for you. This is from Donald Edwards. The speaker mentioned the exploitation of space-borne resources. Is this something that will be practical in the near future or before the turn of the century?
So Donald on YouTube asks, I talked about space extraction or use of resources in space. This is something that's going to be possible in the near future or turn of the century. So first of all, you know, in terms of shifting perspective, everything on Earth relies on this one very important resource, which is a giant inferno in the center of the solar system. We have this deep energy relationship with our star. And so we are already talking about resource extraction. All of our problems relate to photons and each other. So there's that. There's also the question of spectrum and orbits and gravity as a kind of resource. There's a lot of jockeying going on right now around where are all these thousands and thousands of satellites going to go, who's going to control them, who's going to be able to use the spectrum. So there's a set of resources there. And then, yeah, there are companies that are very seriously working on asteroid mining, you thinking about resources that we can use on the moon. You know, the moon is the gravitationally cheapest place to get to, so anything that's there we can use is turn it into a bus station for the rest of the solar system. This is our glorious bus station on there. You know, these resources are there, and so asteroid mining, all of these things, you know, just like I said, we know how to do it. We know how to get to space. We could do any of this stuff right now because everyone is coming on. The question is, when we arrive at the right balance of collective will, you know, engineering solutions and costs, that is actually going to happen. And I think that when we actually do bring asteroids, it's going to be like the dog that caught the bus. I think it's going to totally transform how we think about natural resources. Depending on how big the asteroid is and how it works. But from what I understand from talking to experts, it's really more about this than I do. What really is interesting is not so much bringing resources from space back to Earth, because we have everything we need. We live in the Garden of Eden, we have everything here. But it gets interesting thinking about how we can leverage the resources in space to do things in space. Because anytime you're talking about dragging a bunch of stuff back to Earth or taking a bunch of stuff off Earth and doing things elsewhere, you're using a tremendous amount of energy dealing with gravity as well. And so if you can, you know, figure out how to use the resources of the solar system to explore the solar system, that's whenever somebody really figures that out, things are really going to start taking off. Congratulations. We've reached the end. Well,